Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
I'm really, really pleased today to have CP Serret on the show. I read your book, Grendel VVept, and then the novella, Playing God, quite recently. I came across these because you reminded me before recording that I made some post on Twitter about purple prose, and you suggested that you might not have purple prose, but something approaching that. And just through that interaction, I decided that Grendel VVept sounded pretty interesting. So I had a look, and I'm really glad I did. Some very odd and very gripping work here. Not the sort of thing I'd recommend to everyone, particularly Grendel VVept, because it's I guess I'd describe it as almost 20th century modernist cosmic horror. That doesn't quite cover all the bases.
I think
but
that's
anyway,
pretty close, though.
Yeah, I'm glad for that chance encounter. So welcome on.
Yep. Thank you for inviting me and my infernal texts to your book club. We're happy to be here, and it's always surprising that the one little chance accident will open up a new door and a new opportunity for conversation.
Yeah. So you've put out that I could find. You've published Grendel VVept, which is a novel, the novellas Never Human and Playing God, which you've now released as a single hardcover containing both of them, called American Fictions. And then Die the Villain. I'm pretty sure Die the Villain was the one where I asked you if I should read it and you just said no.
Yeah, I've actually removed that one recently from the market.
Okay.
I've taken it out of print. It's really kind of, I kind of think of it now as the last of my practice novels. It was the fourth manuscript I wrote. Grendel VVept is the fifth. And I was always going to decide, well, which should be the first book I published? And I'm kind of thinking Grendel VVept probably should have been the first one in hindsight.
And you also, shortly before we were recording, I think it was today, at least my time, you sent me some several years of posts you made on timezone.com about, ostensibly about watch. Largely the posts are about watches, but through the very, very, at least to my quite ignorant mind when it comes to watches, in-depth discussions of the watches. You will also use it as a vehicle to talk about Japanese history, various aspects of advertising mythology. That was both unexpected and, the more I think about it, actually very expected, given the books of yours that I've read.
I think it's probably a strong relation to how I think in general. The context in which those articles arose goes back to the 90s, still the early internet, the early web, and back then the digital cameras were first making their real appearance in the market. And there are people, who are buying these fancy watches, taking pictures of them, and then they would say, "Hey, look, I have a cool watch." And that was kind of the whole conversation. And I'm like, you guys are missing a whole great deal of context here of what's going on here with the history of the countries these watches evolved in, the designs. So I really strove to give the context of every element of whether it's the mechanisms, the designs, both in Japanese history, European history, the personalities, the design, how the designs evolved. So it gets pretty involved, as you saw.
Yeah.
But it does show you kind of the thinking that leads to something like Grendel VVept. It's very, very related.
Yeah, so maybe one way to lead into a discussion of Grendel VVept and Playing God would be to ask, what is, and so I'm not going to say this with French pronunciation because I don't speak French, but Le Project Serret, which is at the beginning of the books of yours that I have, it's the same layout, and that is what introduces the book. It's on either the first page or very, very close to the beginning. What is this project?
The project kind of stems from what drives me to write, because I'm really more of a reader than a writer. I've never really had the vision of having a career as the great novelist or anything like that. So for me, the inspiration to write comes from what I don't see. in the market. When I have some weird idea and I've never seen anyone else do it, like, okay, this is kind of missing. And maybe there's an opportunity for me to write something original.
I'm really pleased to hear you're doing a sci-fi novel. That will be odd because
I promise it will be.
yeah, it's an oddness in Grendel VVept from multiple directions. Like I said earlier, the best way I can describe it is a modernist cosmic horror, almost a Joycean cosmic horror at times. You've got a lot of the aspects of particularly the American modernists who are living in Paris, where you've got a particular style of formatting. At least in Grendel VVept, that felt quite Joycean. You know, the way you handle dialogue, for example, or speech. In you'll have descriptions of people's emotional states rendered as colors or clouds of smoke. I think that was more prominent in Playing God. You've, of course, got a number of different languages and a number of different alphabets. So you'll just like throw cuneiform, you'll throw Greek, you'll throw Latin, you'll throw... there was definitely German in Playing God. I can't remember if it was in Grendel VVept. I'll just go ahead and assume it was.
There was a Phoenician as well in Grendel VVept. I don't think we got any German, though.
Yeah, you've got all of these aspects that to me feel very modernist, and you're using that to tell a cosmic horror. I mean, epic in terms of not in terms of page count, in terms of how much ground you cover. Not the scope of the story initially is much smaller than it ends up being at the very end.
Deceptive, deliberately. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this onion here, and the blurb. I tried very carefully to kind of limit it to kind of a little bit of what you get in the first act, so that you're not really ready for how deep this is going to plunge once we really get the thing going. And so the scope is enormous for such a tiny book. And you really probably have no idea what you're in for when you start with page one.
No. And I'll be very careful with spoilers while we're talking, because people, if this sounds interesting to people, they should experience it for themselves. I wouldn't blame someone if they picked it up, got halfway through and just bounced off it. But I'd encourage people to give it a shot at least.
I was afraid of the DNF situation, but it's probably a very steep climb to get there. But I feel like the reward is worth it once you actually get everything put together. There's probably some faith required on the reader's part to keep going despite the seeming dead ends of resolutions and the protagonist's struggle to understand what's happening to him.
Yeah, look, I will say at the very least, if someone picks it up, gives it a shot, I doubt you've read something like this before. Because that one thing I liked a lot in it is that from the perspective of the cosmic horror, the oddness and the disorientation comes from multiple directions. Because oftentimes in cosmic horror, that disorientation or the feeling of powerlessness or the feeling of mystery will come from one thing. It might come from description, say just verbal descriptions of something unsettling, being slightly unfair. It can be the Lovecraft, someone sees a tentacle monster and goes insane. It's, that sort of description. Whereas in Grendel VVept, the oddness is coming at you from a lot of different directions. And probably most strikingly for me is it's coming from the formatting and just the way the book is laid out. You do some very interesting things. Say the comparison of a flea and I, and I don't want to spoil that too much for people reading, but you will just use certain things like even the size of fonts to an impressive effect. Something also because I just didn't see it coming. So what actually came first in Grendel VVept? Was it the Joyce? Was it the cosmic horror? Was it the formatting?
So it's kind of a long story when it comes to the roots of this novel, because the initial idea really comes from the structure. I was thinking about it back like in the 90s or so, back kind of post the ninja craze and the shogun craze in the 80s. I'd gotten very much into Japanese history, and I was, watching Kurosawa movies and, reading Tale of Genji, all the classics, the, diaries of the Indian ladies and all that sort of thing. And I kind of had the idea of having a novel where you would have a story where the events of the past are driving the events of the future. And so kind of in a Japanese setting, but I kind of, put the notes away, put it in the bank for a while I was writing for Time Zone. And then later, the cosmic horror aspect came while I was reading The Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence, which is kind of probably a strange place to find cosmic horror. But he was talking about how he was in the desert watching, the sands go over, the wind go over the sands, and how he realized, this, I can see where people would come up with the idea of like a formless, omnipresent God when you're out here in the desert in this vast, silence and this, limitless horizon. And that got me thinking about Lovecraft, kind of the idea of the form, a formless entity like Yog-Sothoth, that kind of thing. And that led me to think of, well, if we kind of make a parallel and we can have, something like the formless God like that, and then something like the Auton becomes, the Lovecraftian, like Azathoth at the center of the universe, that led me to kind of create a structure that I can kind of place against something like the Ophite cosmology and Gnosticism, and Autonism, and really bring all these kind of Lovecraftian elements into the mythology we already have. So have it kind of be present in the literature that we can already reference.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, it's not that great a get if I say there's Beowulf in there, because it's named Grendel VVept,
Right.
But I did really like how much you're pulling on mythology and a lot of mythology that I'm just completely unfamiliar with. Particularly sort of the ancient Sumerian and so on legends.
I had a lot of fun with that because it's something that I didn't really know about when I started. I deliberately said I'm going to. I probably try to avoid writing about myself. So as Egyptophile, I'm going to write a guy who loves Mesopotamia and who has something against Egypt. Yes, he has resentment against the Egyptology because they get all the money. So those bastards, and so and again, in contrast, so instead of having Lovecraft's deep ones, we have the established fishermen from the Sumerian mythology that we can pull on and bring that into the story. And what are they doing? What were they up to? And we can kind of explore that. And to go back to what you were saying about the kind of the modernist techniques, to me, when I was reading all that, all the modernist masters, Hemingway and Faulkner and Fitzgerald and Joyce, etc. To me, it's like, here's this great toolkit of narrative techniques that we can use to play with to create different effects for the reader. Or like the amazing typography in the Random House Joyce, where they had these huge letters and the effect that had when you read the book, when you stately Black Mulligan, plumply starts walking down the lane, and you have this huge S that goes across like 2 pages, and like, wow, that really smacks you in the face as a reader and really kind of wakes you up. And I think, well, you can play with that kind of idea in the formatting of the book and really have it, also interact with the reader's experience. It's part of also why I don't really do ebooks, is because of that reason. It's like there's things you can't do to create those experiences for the reader as they interact with the text.
Yeah, I how did you start to develop this interest in formatting and typography? Because I've just noticed you a few times, either in our correspondence in DMs or online, is note that I think with quite a hint of pride that the way you format books lets them be quite short in terms of page length while having a higher word count. So this seems like something that you've paid a lot of attention to. How did that begin? I mean, you obviously said you were struck by reading the modernist masters, how much they could do with that. Was that where it started, or were you thinking about?
It literally does begin with Joyce, and actually by accident as well, because I was working on Die the Villain, and one of the things that I'd really try to do is to learn what my characters know that I don't know, and he was kind of a different reader than I am, very much into like the French classics, things like that. So when I was at the library, they had a really great selection of the French novels in French. And I was looking at the novel. I was looking at how because the French used the quotation dash as the normal way of writing dialogue, like Spanish as well. The quotation dash is the standard usage for how they write dialogue in prose. And I was thinking, well, how would you do that in English? I was thinking that's really interesting. So I went upstairs in the library looking for Kafka for some reason, and literally on this shelf directly above Kafka was Ulysses. And I was like, oh, you know what? I remember my teacher talking about this in college. Let me have a quick look. And I pulled it down. I opened it up. I'm like, oh my God. Literally what I was just thinking about, how to use the quotation dash in English, is in front of me here on Ulysses. And that is where it started. So I was like, wait, let me play with this myself. So I tracked down every writer in English that I could find. Roddy McDowell in Ireland, Alan Patton in South Africa, all these writers who also use the quotation dash. There's a number of different writers who experiment with it. Everyone kind of does it their own way, since it's not a standard method in English usage. So you can kind of do your own thing with that. And also the typography of the Random House Joyce edition, where that great work was done with the typography. And that really got me started in working on different ways to play with the typography in the text. And then I got more and more into it as I was designing my own books for publication, and I read up and studied on typography across history, and so here we are.
Yeah. I think that was probably one of the reasons why I focused on Joyce particularly, or where I felt there was a Joyce influence, even among other modernists, probably because of the quotation dash. Because was that in all of his books? Was he using it even as far back as Dubliners?
He used it all the way back to Stephen Hero, the manuscript he threw in the fire, which you can find published in fragments because someone tried to rescue it out of the ashes. And so, it goes very back to his beginning. So I don't know if he was influenced because he lived in France a lot. Maybe that's where he got it from. But he was using that from the beginning, as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever use the quotation dash, because I like aesthetically how it almost breaks down that separation between the different registers of a text, between, say, someone's speech and then descriptions, and it keeps it all. It makes it feel much more unified. But
that's really what struck me and drew me to it myself. Yeah, that. Because I find a lot of times English readers will skim the prose looking for dialogue because the quotations are always kind of nested in the action of the story a lot of times. And so they're not really paying attention to the prose because it's kind of meshed together frequently. And the quotation dash really puts the prose and the dialogue in distinct blocks. That if you're going to read the prose, well, here it is. If you're not going to read it, then go ahead and jump to the dialogue if you want.
Well, I'm in two minds about it, though, because I really like very, very structural text, and I like in English. Czech does the same. I'm not sure about German, how you'll have quotation marks of some form that just blocks things off, for the same reason why I really like in Spanish how questions are handled, how you not only have a question mark at the end of a question, but an inverted one at the beginning. And I really like almost the geometry of that, how it gives such a nice structure. I've toyed with using that in my own writing. I just think it would be far too pretentious if I took the sort of how Spanish handles questions and chucked that into English, even though I think it would look quite satisfying. Maybe I'll give it a shot, but
hey, sometimes pretension is how you get there. You have to make the leap and just kind of go for it.
One thing also about Grendel VVept that I liked a lot was as you were saying earlier, how you're trying to bring in existing mythology into a cosmic horror story, I really, really liked how that technique makes the danger and the mystery feel much more immediate, because you in some ways have the story leach out into the reader's everyday life. Because when I was going back and looking at, Fishmen and Oannes, or however it's pronounced, and
Good
seeing
enough.
that these are real things, these are real artifacts that archaeologists have come across and are trying to work out what they mean. I really like that through Grendel VVept, you've made my first encounter with those things mediated by your story. So now, like, my experience of Mesopotamian history and mythology is just going to be colored by that. I really enjoy that technique of your books spreading their tentacles out into the reader's world and not just being contained within the book.
Yeah, it really gives an immediacy to all of the ideas of what's happening, so that it's never completely removed, as you would have, say, with Lovecraft frequently, is the monsters and everything. It's all very fascinating, but it's all very far away frequently as well. Even if he tries to do it's always in New England, of course. It's always in New England.
Yeah.
But it's always a world kind of on the edge of our world. Innsmouth on the shore, and the deep ones are off there on the Devil's Reef, and it's close, but not right here where you're living, as it is with Grendel VVept, where it's the museum down the street. It's right there in the major city, and not off in some small town in a obscure university, as in Lovecraft style.
Yeah, I find in Lovecraft too, just because he relied so much on the framework of his stories being some sort of document left behind, so either diary entries or signed. I think at the Mountains of Madness, I think that was like the notes written by one of the scientists for posterity, but he'll often use that, and I feel like it takes a lot of the tension out of things, because you kind of know that whoever wrote it survived at least long enough to write stuff down before going crazy because they saw a shape-shifting being out of time and space.
Yeah, we're not in the event, we're not experiencing it as it happens.
And I found something else I liked a lot about Grendel VVept is that you'll often have the feeling of the text itself just kind of falling apart in front of you because of how you'll handle. I don't think it's too spoilery to say it jumps between time periods, because I think the first jump happens quite early on, and
for sure.
how you handle the jumps is just so abrupt. As in a sentence, just halfway through a sentence, you'll just finish it, and then just jump in halfway through another sentence. A few centuries in the past, or somewhere else, and at another time, which I'll leave up to people to come across when they read it. I enjoyed that sort of inventiveness with the formal aspects of Grendel VVept, as opposed to much cosmic horror I've come across. And granted, I'm not a very deep reader of cosmic horror. I've read mostly Lovecraft. What did I read recently? Actually, it was either The Yellow King or The King in Yellow. One. It shows how deeply I read that one. It's one of those.
I'm also honestly not really a deep reader of cosmic horror. It's been by virtue of the fact that 90% of it really it's all short stories, and a lot of it is pretty derivative. I mean, it's the Lovecraft mythos is really the first one that really welcomed fan fiction, and so that's a lot of it really amounts to fan fiction of varying quality. Some is very well written, some less so. But what was really missing for me was the fact that where are the novels? Where is a story that brings the full human experience into the existential horror that cosmic horror likes to explore? And I think that there's a lot missing that we could play with in a cosmic horror context that isn't being touched on in any of these texts. Simply be like in Lovecraft's case, he thought it wasn't necessary to get into, say, like the erotic or those kinds of relationships and the tension that could bring. Cosmic horror it's bigger than that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be explored really. And I'm thinking, well, no, I think we can explore that, and I think that we can actually heighten the experience of cosmic horror by bringing those kinds of human relationships and the real full breadth of human experience into the cosmic horror context to be explored and to really, I guess that probably says it. Yeah, we really want to just explore the full human condition, I should say, in the context of the universe we actually really find ourselves in, where we are kind of living in that sense where no one really understands what's going on. We have the crisis of physics. Nothing really works, and what's going on? We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like cosmic horror is only growing more and more relevant today. I mean, I don't really see, especially with technological change seemingly accelerating, I don't see a future being more easily explicable when compared to now than one where things are more easily graspable by just an individual human. I don't see a future with fewer barely comprehensible entities bearing down on us than today. So I'm glad that people are using cosmic horror to explore things a bit more deeply than, I mean, I guess than Lovecraft did, but I guess he also is he was one person, and it might just be more of a function of cosmic horror for quite a while being a relatively small, relatively small genre with just this one gigantic player that basically everyone's having to in some way deal with. And the way that most people dealt with him or responded to him was by either directly referencing his mythos or picking up stylistic elements of his, whether that be the short story, whether it be his sort of King James inflected writing style and so on. Anyway, I'm just glad to see people are taking cosmic horror in non-Lovecraft directions. You did reference Dagon, actually, in Grendel VVept, which I
had
liked.
a bit of fun with that, bringing Dagon, but of course going to the mythological Dagon, but kind of more, I kind of deliberately using the kind of, I think it was it Milton that I quoted, or was it Blake? I can't remember. As far as playing off the early kind of miscomprehension of what Dagon was versus what we now know in archaeology. So I deliberately avoided going too realistic because I wanted to have more fun with that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we do bring Dagon into to visit all the fans.
Yeah, you left it sufficiently vague that it could mean either thing. It could be, yes, a concrete reference to what we know archaeologically, or you could be just bringing in aspects of Lovecraft and saying, oh, well, in the context of Grendel VVept, there's also all of this happening. But it's unclear, and I did like that murkiness.
Well, I did kind of have a few Easter eggs that kind of give some winks and nods to the established mythos. Again, because people, I know, I enjoy it. So I said, we'll do it anyway because it's fun. But I didn't want to do something original because I did for a while kind of sit on the fence. Do I want to, in any way, really connect it, do a hard connection to the, like Carcosa from King in Yellow or things like that? So, but no, I decided I want to do something original, even if it's a bit more work, and to do the world building, even if it's just for one book, to really give it its own identity, so that I have the freedom to go where I want with it. I'm not going to be hemmed in by prior texts of other writers.
Yeah, and actually, now that you mention sort of that, the process of revising the book, how many revisions and drafts did Grendel VVept see? Because
one very long revision. It took over a year. I mean, it only took like maybe 4 months or so to do the first draft, but the revisions took well over a year because I really had sometimes I had to stop and do some hard research and learning on like when it comes to writing the Renaissance sequences in the kind of early modern style. I had to read up on the history of English. I dug up a bunch of books from the Victorian era on, the vocabulary of the period, syntax. There was a lot of research that really went into being able to at least try to write that fairly fluidly, and in at least a semi-convincing manner, so that it doesn't totally take the reader out of the book, but also without doing it so authentically that it's encrypted and no one understands it.
Yeah, again, this isn't really too spoilery because it happens quite early on. When the book jumps around in time, the prose style changes to reflect the time period, which I really liked. It really threw me the first time it happened. And it also, basically when that happened, I thought I'd quite like to talk to this guy on the podcast, because this is just very odd. It's a sort of thing that it's what just tiny niche publishing is really good for, coming out with books like, I like Grendel VVept. I don't think it really has mass appeal. Books that
very
are odd. It's just very, very odd and not really willing to compromise, or at least it doesn't feel like it was willing to compromise on oddness. You just said that there were some compromises. Like you're not writing.
I tried not to go overboard. Like very early on, I intended to use more archaic glyphs, early spellings, things like that. But I realized, what? Well, number one, just as from a writing perspective, it's going to be very hard to proofread that, and very hard to spell check a book written in the spelling of the Elizabethan period. I'd have to hire some professor of philology to help me out or something. It would be very difficult. So practically speaking, it's getting too hard, and probably the readers are going to be hitting just a wall and just not be able to go any further at that point, because so few people can actually really read that comfortably. I mean, I can read it, but then I read a lot of Shakespeare in the original spelling, so it's not a problem for me, but I'm not everybody. So I know it's probably going to be a little too difficult if I take it that far. So let me kind of give it in the style to keep it fun, but I really didn't want to write scenes like that in contemporary English and then have the character say, "Oh, it's a wonderful day today in 1570 Ferrara, and Italy is lovely this time of year." It's like, no, I would kill myself. No, no, we're not going to do it that way. I'm going to transport you there by giving you the thoughts and the voice of the character there, if I can. That's going to be the goal. So that's where pretension, we're going to go for it. When the decision to try to write early modern is a bold one, and so whether or not I pulled it off is up to the reader. But that's sometimes you have to go for it and hope for the best.
Yeah, I suppose you could have written it in period appropriate Italian dialect. So you're compromising on that. But I'm asking about editing, because especially it's how you handle several different time periods in this book with characters who, I'm trying not to be spoilery, but they refer to each other. We'll leave it at that. These are very, very deeply connected. Did you have all of these particular resonances between different time periods and places in your mind when you went through that first draft? And how much were you tightening things up in revision? Because this would be really easy to just have a bunch of inconsistencies everywhere.
It was a very strange experience to write, I'll have to say. It's because you're working with all these time periods at the same time. And sometimes I felt like I didn't quite understand what I was writing, because I would write little scenes here and there as I could see them. And then I would get home, because I'd be writing on my phone part of the time, and part of the time I'd be on writing my computer, and I'd have to come home and put the puzzle pieces together. And then, okay, it makes sense. Now I understand what I'm trying to do here. But yeah, it was a very inspired work when it came to the drafting part of it, because I could just see what was happening. So I just would, capture it, write it down, and we'll put it together afterwards and make sense of it. As far as the voice of the characters, I think it helped to have each person kind of have their own voice. And I think that helped keep it straight as far as the personality differences or opinion differences, their perspective differences. Having each character speak in their own language, basically, I think kept some separation so that I could keep it organized in my head so that things don't blend too soon or incorrectly. But yeah, the editing was mainly more about fleshing out details and polishing the prose and getting the voices tuned. Yeah, like I said, doing research, doing additional research, fact checking all the Mesopotamian stuff, all the mythology stuff. There's a lot of detail. You want to make sure everything's correct, and checking the dates again, and does all the math add up? All that really tedious stuff has to be checked over and over again.
Yeah, this is the sort of book. So it's not. I wouldn't really consider this one of those puzzle novels where something like what Pynchon might write, where you can research things quite a lot in order to really work out what happened. I think it's possible just to read this through and you'll get what's going on. But at the same time, like you were saying, there are dates and times that need to align. I mean, there's just cuneiform in this book that I'll go ahead and trust you got right because I have no idea. But there's a whole lot of stuff where if someone read it and really wanted to research it, you absolutely can. There's a great deal going on. Do you have?
I had a lot of fun.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
I had a lot of fun putting all those little bits of other languages, the cuneiform, the Greek, all that stuff. I felt it might be more immersive as a reader to kind of go into the head of an archaeologist who knows all these languages, because these guys are kind of pretty incredible. I mean, the average Assyriologist has to know just like 7 languages or more to do their job. It's being a polyglot is really the price of admission when it comes to working in Assyriology. So really kind of bringing you into his head, because I wanted to write him as a real archaeologist, not Indiana Jones, someone who really does the job and really feel what it likes to be someone who can see all these texts and can think in all these languages. And they're really a part of how he sees the world. And I think that helps kind of bring you into the story more as well, versus him just, referencing things but not really showing them to you.
Yeah. I think that was definitely the right choice, because it just wouldn't make sense for an archaeologist to be transliterating stuff in their head. Because, like you're saying, this guy does know not just ancient Greek, but if you were to use that term, he would ask you, well, which one?
Exactly.
that's the sort of character you're dealing with here. So I think that was a really good decision, and it made reading fun because you have to. I don't speak Greek. I can sound out the letters. It's in some ways archaeological for the reader too, having to decode these things. You gave some helping hands. You did transliterate some of those. You didn't leave us completely in the dark.
The beauty of having an Assyriologist be the narrator is that he's basically a teacher as well. So having him translate for the reader, I think, was a natural choice. So, he sees it and then he, comma, okay, here's what it means in English. And then he continues on with what he's saying, so that you're not being left behind as he continues in his thought process, trying to figure out what's happening, so that he can kind of bring the puzzle pieces forward. Okay, here's where we currently are with the puzzle that we're working on. And what have we got? So, okay, I think this is where I think we're at. And then later on, he'll do it again. He'll bring together the current puzzle pieces, try to figure out what's going on, and kind of so you kind of stay in the same place as he is, as he continues to peel back the mystery of what's going on in the story.
I do want to bring playing God into this, because I'm talking about it less, not because I think it's less worthwhile. It's just like Grendel VVept, I had much more of a what the fuck am I reading kind of feeling with. Because playing God is more straightforward. It's less, there are just fewer experiments going on. But I was wanting to ask, what is it about certain periods of history that inspire your stories? Because both Grendel VVept and Playing God play with time and place a lot. So Playing God is very much of sort of 1969, 1970 United States. And you're obviously having a lot of fun with the time and place because you're referencing things that would have been contemporary at the time. Even some of the language, although the language it's not just, straight ahead 60s or early 70s slang, because it's from the perspective of someone who's also, say, able to think in German very easily. It's that the perspective's a bit more complicated than that. But then, of course, Grendel VVept as well. A lot of focus on time and place. So again, what is it about these times and places that really attracts you?
In the case of playing God, it was a little weird idea that I kind of sparked up while I was writing Never Human. I'm a big fan of reincarnation stories in East Asian literature. It's very common. It's very common and almost a trope really at this point in manga and anime and web novels to use reincarnation stories. And that's really what spawned the idea. And so that's kind of, anytime you bring in reincarnation, you're talking about history and time, because you have characters who may have memories of different eras. And that's a big part of what I like to play with, because it's just, it gives you an interesting way to kind of have a person who has more than one perspective on what's happening to them at the moment, because they have experiences that they kind of are pulling from in a different era. And so in this case, it was I guess I don't know if it's really going to be a spoiler, since it's really set to be after World War II. And the concept is a character who doesn't really believe in reincarnation, but she kind of has one foot in the idea that she may be reincarnated of someone who died at the end of World War II, and she's born at 45, and her nemesis in this case is someone again born at the same time, who she thinks might be like basically Hitler or someone like that, who is also reincarnated.
Yeah, you even made him a painter.
You better believe it. So that setup, it really required the character to be born at that point in time, and required the nemesis to be also born at that point in time, so that it sticks us, just by mathematically, okay, we're going to have to be right here at the end of the 60s by virtue of the concept, unless I wanted to make them college age or something. But I like the idea that, okay, you're in high school, you think your classmate might be Hitler, do you take him out or not? It's the old baby Hitler problem. What do you do? Do you just let it go? What do you do? So that kind of put her in a good little crunch, and that's a nice dilemma to play with in the story wise.
Yeah, I read Playing God after Grendel VVept, and because Grendel VVept is so supernatural, I was almost expecting that angle. And so when you started talking about these dreams of the Second World War, I was so primed for, are we going to jump back there? What's going to go on? Okay. And then you ended up playing it much more straight. I think it's identifiably yours because your prose style is quite distinct, but it's less mind bending than Grendel VVept.
In the case of Playing God, I didn't want it to be cut and dried that it's a kind of a reincarnation story. I wanted it to be a bit more ambiguous. So is it that she is actually reincarnated, or is it simply that she watched too many documentaries as a kid and she's traumatized by that as well? And she is just, her subconscious has been just riddled with bullets and bombs. And she's been kind of twisted a bit by that experience. And also just by the kind of inherited trauma of what happened to her family during the Holocaust. And so is it a reincarnation story? Is it just a psychological thing? So I wanted it to be ambiguous, leave it to the reader to see how they feel about it and what they want to conclude. But yeah, with Grendel VVept, it is meant to be cosmic horror, so I'm not going to be shy about throwing you across time and bringing in cosmic monsters. That's what we're here for with a story like Grendel VVept. With Playing God, it was meant to be more of a ethical dilemma as far as what is she going to choose to do and how is she going to act, given what she thinks and what she feels, and how sure is she about what's happening. And based on her suspicions, is she right to act? Is her action correct? At the end, are you happy with the ending? Do you think it should have ended differently? So it's meant to be more of a story where the reader should be, at least my intent would be to say that they should be thinking about her choices and the outcome of those choices, and are you happy with how things played out or not? And so it was, so it's really just meant to be a kind of a straightforward, kind of contemporary novel, probably still unpublishable by current standards, but that's why we do it ourselves.
I did find it a really interesting decision to make the main character a very, very obsessive classical musician. Because, I mean, shout out to the obsessive classical musicians listening, but there is a type of someone who just seems very slightly detached from the people around them because they are so taken with this music. And because there's such a tradition in classical music of intense practice schedules, ruthless teachers, that this type of person is both attracted and these odd personality traits emphasized. So it made for a very interesting perspective to have a protagonist with that subjectivity, so the intense classical musician's subjectivity, and it makes some of her actions more, I guess, more, if not sympathetic, then it actually makes sense. You can see that type of person and how they would behave in those certain ways. Do you have experience with very, very obsessive classical musicians, or is this just from your own research?
Yeah, it's really just research. I think in part it might be a little bit inspired. There was an anime called Your Lie in April, which is about that kind of those kinds of personalities, which I thought was kind of being more interested in the subject. And of course, the old movie Shine, with very Geoffrey Rush, about the pianist Peter Helfgott, who famously had a kind of a psychological collapse.
Was it Rack 3 that tipped him over the edge? It was 2 or 3, I think.
Rock 3, yeah.
Yeah.
The famous, terrifying Rock 3. But I do find those personalities very interesting, and that experience very interesting. And I kind of got to play in her imagination and how the kind of things she thinks about as she plays and the vision she has as she's making music. So it's a little surreal in that aspect, but not quite to the extreme that we've experienced in Grendel VVept.
How did you find writing a novella, or novellas, because you've written multiple, versus novels? Because I've got a first draft of a novella, and I was surprised by how big a difference that word count can make. They feel like quite different beasts.
Yeah, it was a bit challenging to squeeze it all down to that size, because I think originally I was going to do Playing God as a novel, but at that point I was not really feeling like I wanted to spend, like 2 years again writing this one book. So I say, well, can I crop it down to a novella? I tried to do 3 acts, didn't quite work. Still needed some more room, so I made it a 4-act story.
Yeah,
and it ended up being 35,000 words instead of 20,000. But it's about as tight as I could make it and keep all the matter. And honestly, the antagonist was so unpleasant to write. I don't think I could have done a novel with him. He was just really grinding my gears, that guy. So I kind of pushed him to the background because I just could not deal with him. It's like, okay, we'll have him enough to be a threat, but he was just so unpleasant. I just didn't want to deal with him.
It's interesting that you didn't like doing it, because I found the sections with Roy were the most engaging ones. Maybe because dialogue is often the most interesting when you've got people butting heads, and that is Roy Arnold up and down.
He's very meaty. So I didn't hold back with Roy at all, and probably that's why I find him so unpleasant to write. But I literally had I literally read Mein Kampf to write this guy, because I really tried to go for Hitler. I read about Hitler's habits, how he talks, his verbal tics. I brought all that to Roy, so that he is literally Hitler on the page. And so because of that, again, he's really not pleasant to deal with from a writing standpoint. But he's very, I think, very strong, very kind of charismatic character, but also very poisonous when you face him directly. So I didn't really end up wanting to deal with him too often. So probably that's why it worked better for me than as a novella. Because if I had a novel, I would have to have more Roy interactions. And again, he was pissing me off.
That's what slowed you down. Because having read two of your works, you strike me as a writer inclined towards maximalism. It's sort of a more is more kind of writer. So it's interesting to hear what makes you reduce scope and reduce word count. Well, actually, do you feel that way about your own writing? Do you feel like you're inclined towards maximalism?
I feel like I try to compress the narrative to the maximum. So I try to do the fewest characters I can to do the story, the fewest scenes. So yeah, actually, I feel kind of the opposite. I think I try to give you the most in the smallest space. Kind of the way I write the articles for Time Zone is how much information can I squeeze into these 2,000 words with no wasted space, no wasted sentences. Can we get all the information with a tight narrative to really to not waste the reader's time, but also just as aesthetically, I like to have as much squeezed in as possible. To what degree that's successful, again, I'll leave the reader to decide. But I guess I should ask, what do you mean by maximalist, really? Because when I see maximalists, I think of these guys like Schadenfreude and Solenoid and all these mega 1,000-page tomes that we see are currently popular in the kind of serious reader space.
Yeah. I guess yes. It's if it's not maximalism in the sense of Cartarescu. I think information density is what I'm picking up on. And
then definitely yes.
Yeah, and then when coming across information density, my assumption is normally that sort of the same information was there, just spread out over more space in previous drafts and slammed together in increasingly dense quantities.
The funny thing with Playing God is it was the most tightly or outlined book I've ever written. I mean, I did multiple drafts of the outlines over and over again. If I made a change, I would redraft the outline. So the version Playing God VVept is essentially the first draft. I did almost no editing, just kind of a few fixes for the timeline. So there's very little revision. It's really the way I wrote it the very first time. So it's actually kind of the quickest book I ever wrote as far as the actual drafting goes, because it was just meticulously planned in a way I couldn't do with Grendel VVept, in the way I can't really do with my current book, which is because it's so big and so complicated that it's going to be a few years work just to sort that one out.
Oh, yeah. How long do you reckon this one coming up is going to be, or is it just too early in the process
I think
say?
In terms of the word count, it will probably be pretty close to Grendel VVept, because, again, I'm going for, as you say, the maximalist attack on this one and keeping it as dense as possible. It may end up being a little bit longer, but I think by striving to keep it short, even if I go over, the result will still be pretty tight. And that's really what the goal is just to not repeat myself, not to, have scenes that go off to nowhere and don't really lead to any kind of conclusion, or anything that doesn't push the story forward, then I don't really want it on the text. So even if I have to make savage cuts, I do it. Like there was a point in Grendel VVept when I was doing revisions. I spent 2 weeks revising a section. And then when I got to the next section, I was like, oh, I'm kind of repeating myself here. So I just kind of said, okay, let me take a deep breath. And I cut out everything I just spent 2 weeks writing.
It's not
because
nice
it basically was going to just kind of repeat what it was. Because anytime you have a situation where an event happens and the characters talk about what happens, it's like, well, you don't need both. We either talk about it or we show it. The reader doesn't need to go through it twice. When other writers do this, I want to shoot myself. So it's like, okay, deep breath. It's better if in this case, because we have to have them talk about it because that leads to something else. So having shown it, we will chop that out and just throw the reader into the conversation instead. And so you should have cheered for the work you just did for 2 weeks, but it, I think, ultimately results in a better reading experience for the reader.
Mm, mm. When you're editing, is that what you're bearing in mind? You're mostly trying to refine it so that it's more comprehensible to the reader compared to, say, a first draft, which is often the author at their most personal, so personal to a point where it just might not even make much sense to a reader? Or are you...
Usually, like if I'm drafting, it's really going to be mostly about getting down what happens and getting in the dialogue. And I tend to stay very lean on descriptions just because I don't want to spend too much time writing an elaborate description just to cut it later, like I just explained with my other revision. So when I go back and revise, it's usually to go back and kind of, okay, is everything clear? Can you see the scene? Can you smell the scene? Do you feel the scene? Are all the senses present? Can you see everything? Yeah. Do we have enough detail but not too much detail? So are we not slowing things down with too much description? Because that's another pet peeve of mine is every leaf on the tree, and we're going to take 5 pages to kind of give you a setting that we're going to walk right out of in the next act. So the revision process is mostly about putting flesh on the bones more often than not. So like I think the first draft of Grendel VVept was probably around 60,000 words. Mm-hmm. And then after the revision, it was about 70,000. So you can go back and flesh out the little details once the story is nailed down. Because I don't want to, write story elements that I decide later, okay, I don't need this, chop it off. I don't want to have wasted a month writing a bunch of detail for that section, only to not need it after all. Playing God was odd again because I really got all that done on the first pass. So I was hoping to do that again with the new book, but that's not going to work. So it's just too complicated. I kind of really have to figure it out and stop and research each new section. And so it's going to take a lot longer, but that's okay. It's part of the fun.
Are you willing to talk about the new book all that much? Even just in very general terms? Like when you say really, sci-fi, is it like hard sci-fi, space opera?
It's going to be more like, how to even explain it now? It's more like how do you explain it? I guess I'm thinking of it right now as kind of a cross between the Volsunga Saga and Schismatrix. So make of that what you will. But again, it's going to be very, very mythological, again, in the future, but also it's kind of hard sci-fi, but not with all of the over-explained technology thing we get typically in sci-fi. Okay, we're going to stop the story now and talk about this rivet here for 3 pages.
Yeah. You need to treat these on rocket engines.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in technology for many years frequently. I worked in telecommunications. I've worked in robotics. I've worked in a lot of tech. There's a lot of tech stuff more like for human, which you haven't gotten to. And one experience I had working in tech support, for example, is for most people who use tech itself is transparent. They don't understand how it works. They just push the button. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem we get in with science fiction is that frequently you have a situation where every single character in the story is a technician and they understand how everything works. And that's so unrealistic that I boggles my mind, because the average person who has a cell phone has no idea how this little device here works. Now I do, because I've worked in the industry, but most people don't understand how any of the how the calls work, where it connects, how the calls are routed or processed, any of that. I do, but again, I'm a very, very exception compared to most people who have a cell phone. So when you write a novel, I mean, who are you writing about? Are you writing about people who use tech or the people who actually create the tech? And so the bent, I think one thing is a lot of sci-fi readers really enjoy that aspect of it. So probably they won't be happy with what I'm going to be doing. But from my perspective, I'm mostly writing about people who use tech. And so the tech will be there, but I'm not going to be getting into this granular detail in the kind of a Jules Verne style of explaining how everything works and all that. So it's going to be hard sci-fi. It's going to be, people have to decide that for themselves afterwards. But it's not really the goal to really roll around in the wiring of the systems. It's going to be more about the themes and the characters than that.
Yeah, that is an interesting distinction, actually, whether your main character or your perspective in the story is that of a technician or an engineer or just someone who just doesn't know what's going on. These things are more or less magical.
Yeah, they push the button, it does the thing, we move on with the story. They're not really interested even in how it works. As long as it's not broken and they don't have to call for help, they're okay, and they're happy with whatever's going on. So it's for me. So the sci-fi is really more the setting than really the. And so it could be magic. You could call it a fantasy novel, and just say that we're using tech as the magic in the story. But ultimately, I don't really want to spend too much time in the technical aspect. It really has to be, at least for me, as a writer, writing about the themes of civilization and the characters and everything else that's going on over the larger scope, because it's going to be a much bigger scope than I did in Grendel VVept. So that's the challenge, and why it's really going to be a bigger project. Yeah, it's a monster.
Right. Yeah, because Grendel VVept is not exactly super limited in both time and space. It spreads out. All right. No, yeah, I'm very interested to see what this is going to be.
Before, so yeah, going with the bigger scope means it's. I really kind of have to stop and take a break between sections, because I have to kind of get my head out of the last section to move to the next section, because it's huge time jumps, different characters. It's going to be all over the place. So, and then bring it all together. So the editing will probably be very interesting.
Yeah, because Do you get in an external editor for your work? Are you doing everything yourself? Because the works I read were really clean. I don't remember coming across typos, and that's considering all of the all of the oddness with the punctuation, aspects of the formatting, of different languages, different alphabets. Especially considering all that, it's remarkably clean. Shout out to whoever did it, whether it's you or someone else.
It's all me, for better or worse.
Man,
my purse is very lean, so I can't really afford to bring in someone else to do the proofreading or editing. So it's just, I come up with some tricks to kind of help me keep things clean. Like I will change fonts between edits to kind of break up where things are on the page and make things easier. I mean, I do use software to check for spelling errors as well, but even then, that doesn't get everything. Sometimes you'll have a typo that's a real word, but it's the wrong word.
Yeah, and the classic form from that is the bane of everyone who's ever done proofreading.
Exactly. So yeah, for better or worse, it's all me. So any mistakes, they're mine. So I try to keep it as clean as possible. The advantage of print on demand is that if I do find typos later, I can go in the print file and update it. And there's not 10,000 books out there with typos.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. So just as on a practical note, do you have advice for people who are editing their own works for particularly for proofreading? Because it just sounds like you know how to do it well. Given that, say, you got Grendel VVept to be clean, is saying a lot. It's also, I just find proofreading my own work is much harder, just because oftentimes I'll just read straight over typos because I'm just too close to the text.
Yeah. So again, I think the trick with the fonts works pretty well. What I do is I proofread on more than one device. So I'll download the Word document onto my phone, and then I'll pull it up on an e-reader where you can change fonts very easily. And so you read through it once, make a note of all the errors you find, change the font, go back to read it again, change the font yet again, and every time you do that, it kind of resets something in your brain where it looks new because everything's been moved around, as opposed to always seeing it look the exact same way on your Word document as you're working on your laptop or your PC. And I think that helps a lot. But again, don't be afraid of using. I mean, Grammarly isn't great, but it does help with the spell checking. The grammar advice isn't the best, but the spell check is pretty good, and it does help catch a lot of those little niggling errors with comma's in the wrong place, or missed a quotation mark here, that kind of thing. So it's good to use any tool you can if you can't afford to have some real people get their eyes on it.
Yeah, that's I will definitely use that font technique. That is really helpful because I'm always looking for tips to make proofreading easier and less painful. Because it,
It's
it
worked
just
well for me. So
just feels like manual labor. It doesn't feel like creative work. It just feels like slogging away at a problem.
it is, but I mean, and actually, that was one thing nice that was about working on the novellas. You can read it 3 times for each time you read one time, make it a pass of the
Mm,
full length novel. So it was a lot easier to proofread something like Playing God or Never Human versus Grendel VVept, because yeah, it's a big task to
mm,
proofread 70,000 words, 80,000 words over and over again.
mm. How have you found actually? Have you written much in other languages beyond the say short sections in the books you've written where you'll have French or German and so on? Have you tried writing in languages other than English? Because before we were recording, you mentioned that English is not your first language. Have you
Well,
written much?
that's actually the joke, because at this point, English really is the only language that I'm conversational in.
Mm,
So, I mean, it was the second language that I learned, but in the kind of context where I was growing up in America, the I was basically surrounded by English speakers all day, every day, and I didn't really have a chance to use Spanish anymore, and so that really kind of diminished to the point where it's pretty much my worst Romance language now, and I
mm,
can do better in French or Italian or anything else. Maybe not Portuguese, but the so yeah, I'm not really fluent in anything else but English. I know little bits and bobs here. I've studied lots of languages, but again, if you don't really use language on a regular basis, it's very, very perishable when it comes
mm.
to being able to recall it. So I mean, I had German in class. I had French, Russian. I've studied ancient Egyptian. I've studied Japanese. But again, if you don't use these languages with any frequency, it's very perishable, and you will lose it pretty quickly. So, alas, it's just me in English.
It is terrible how quickly they go. Um, there are languages that I have known reasonably well that I didn't use, and yeah, just after enough years, you actually can't use it anymore, and it feels terrible.
Yeah, it's shocking how quickly it just evaporates. But again, it's use it or lose it. The
Hmm.
mind will focus on what it needs to do right now, as opposed to what you were doing 20 years ago.
Hmm. So you're writing these works, you're editing them, you're putting the books together, you're publishing them under Tempest and Gale. I'll include a link to the website in the show notes. How are you finding publishing such odd books and trying to get readers on social media or through other avenues? Is it still fun? Because you've been doing this for a few years now. Is it still rewarding? Is it still fun? Are there new problems you've come across that you didn't anticipate? Has it become easier? What's the process been like?
It's been like wandering in the desert looking for water. It's been rough. I mean, 'cause it's been at this point a 10-year saga
Mm,
from when I started working on Die the Villain again back in 2015, because I spent 5 years on that manuscript. And where I really made every mistake you can possibly make. And I learned a lot of lessons that really helped me do a better job with
mm,
Grendel VVept. But yeah, in terms of the publishing side of it, that's been 5 years now. And yeah, it's really been the much larger challenge than I really ever would have imagined in terms of trying to get your book seen at all, trying to get
yeah.
reviews. I mean, like with Grendel VVept, I sent review copies in advance all over English speaking world, to the UK, across the US. And after spending all that money and mailing all those books all over the place, I got one professional review for all
Hmm.
that trouble. And for a long time, there were basically no sales. I spent a lot of money on advertising, sold just a few books, and it was kind of like, well, okay, maybe this is it. There's just no readers. I'm not going to find anyone. And so when I wrote Never Human and Playing God, it was really with the expectation that probably they wouldn't get to anybody, because the web was flatline in the market, no readership. But once I did publish Never Human, sorry, I decided to go ahead and jump onto Twitter and see what would happen there. So I enrolled and started posting, and that, ironically enough, is really where we finally started to find a few readers. And by chance, this is where I really got lucky, is that the first reader to do a reader review was an Australian woman who happens to be Greek by descent and who knows Greek. And so when she started reading Grendel VVept, she was having a grand time because of all the Greek in the text.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
there's Greek. This is wonderful. Yeah, so she was probably the ideal person to be the first real reader for the novel, because she really got into the Greek aspect of the text. And so when she wrote a review, that really kind of got the ball rolling. Other people started gambling on it, and we've gotten a few more reader reviews from real people, and that has slowly spread the book a bit around the world. So it's still very exhausting, though, to always be on social media trying to have fun with promoting the book, because I'm as introverted as they come. So reaching out in the social media isn't always the natural course for me, but I try to have fun with it, be a little bit cheeky in terms of how you promote the book, and it does get eyes on occasionally. So we're just kind of seeing how it goes, but it's kind of an uphill battle. I think as you've seen with your own, probably getting your podcast seen on your X channel as well, in terms of it's just very hard to get seen out there.
Yeah, it's a slog. It's sort of an opposite problem to what used to be the case with publishing books, where previously the real difficulty was getting access to the infrastructure used to produce books. Whereas now that's just trivially easy. Like you upload a file to Amazon if you're using KDP and a JPEG for the jacket, and you're away. The thing is, just everyone else can do that. So how do you get noticed? Especially when you're doing something that is harder to market. I mean, I don't envy you. And how do you market something like Grendel VVept? I don't know.
I don't know. Honestly, that's still a question that I'm trying to figure out. Because there are some people who read cosmic horror who will like it, but again, the challenge nature of the text itself, in terms of the prose and the language used, a lot of people will probably just get a chapter in or two, and they'll go like, okay, this isn't for me. This is too hard. Or they didn't sign up to read faux Shakespeare in in the 15th century. So the people who are going to be both kind of interested but also willing to take on the challenge is the question. Because I also find there are some readers out there who read the serious fiction who are buying books like Playing God, but they're not interested in Grendel VVept because they have no interest in cosmic horror. So there's more than one market. But then I kind of knew that going in, that there are going to be people who want to read one book but not the others, and so I'm kind of doing a different genre in every book I write, that the readership is going to be kind of split, but also means that I can't really build up a readership, since I'm not really a horror writer per se, as the readers have kind of been trained to follow that in the market now. It's like you're supposed to write one thing and that's your career. You write this one thing under this one name over and over again. So when people read Grendel VVept, they say, okay, well, what else have you got that I can read like Grendel VVept? Like, well, that's it. You can read Grendel VVept, I guess. It's a unique text. There's no sequels planned. Each book is really intended to be a standalone, complete story. So that is also kind of antithetical to how the market really kind of works nowadays. Everything's about series and trilogies and stories that never ever end, and franchises. So writing up each book to be a complete entity unto itself, it kind of goes against what the market mostly wants. So you're putting yourself, by definition, into a very niche space to write unique works of art. And finding readers for each book then becomes a separate challenge for each book, because you're looking at a different readership for each book.
I guess, in that case, your project, Serret, is a good idea. Or maybe, it's maybe one of the few ideas that might work, in that you become what people will turn up for rather than a particular genre. So you're not the cosmic horror person, or the what would you even call Playing God? It's sort of historical fiction, but not really. Whatever Playing God is as well. They're clearly your books. So yeah, focusing on your own name might be the one way you can go, because you're right with Grendel VVept. It's sort of genre fiction with the skin of literary fiction, or it might be literary fiction in the skin of genre fiction. It doesn't sit comfortably in either place.
Well, that's the funny thing, because when I got the review from Midwest Book Reviews, I sent it to them as a horror novel, and then when they said the review was up, I went looking for it, and I couldn't find the review, and said, "Oh no, it's over here on the literary section with the literary novels," because that's how they saw it, was as literary fiction, not as a comic horror novel. So, yeah, that interpretation really is going to come down to the reader's perspective. So that's why I kind of think as a book, it may appeal to some literary readers who wouldn't normally want to read literary fiction. Normally want to read cosmic horror, because it does kind of stray from the formula in that manner.
Yeah, which we talked about this earlier. It's part of what made me like it, that it doesn't feel formulaic, which is what really kills my interest in almost all cosmic horror. But it does make advertising it a lot more difficult. I suppose the dynamics of selling books are altered such that, because you don't have to sit on inventory. If you're doing print on demand, you can afford to just slowly over time accumulate readers. But I guess the limiting factor there is just your willingness to continue the slog, because it can feel like screaming into the void sometimes, and not in the exciting cosmic horror way. It's just screaming into the void.
Yeah, you grind and you grind, and sometimes there's a book sale, and you grind and nothing happens, and do you keep going? How long do you want to keep going? So yeah, so at this point, I'm not a 20-year-old kid who's writing for the first time and who sees okay, I'll be writing for the next 50 years. I'm in my 50s now, so how much further am I going to go with the project? I don't really have a sense of maybe writing until I'm 80. But yeah, as long as I have a good, strong original ideas, I'll keep going. But yeah, they really have to be worth the trouble to me to put on the page and spend that time to really dig in and fight over every clause and over every single word the way I like to, and try to polish it and bring that textual density that I try to go for. So it's a lot of effort. Again, it's rewarding, but again, it's very demanding. And at some point, are there any readers out there? Please show up. We need you. Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and to listeners, if any of this sounds interesting, I really encourage you to pick up a copy of any of these books, really. But Grendel VVept is certainly the most odd and striking one that I've read. If it sounds appealing at all, give it a shot. And I don't know, check out CP Serret on Twitter and let him know how you might advertise these books, because I'm kind of stumped. They sit uncomfortably across genres.
Yeah, there's a beauty of going across genre in terms of being able to tell a story in a way that hasn't been told before. But again, if readers have very strong genre reputations, it can lose the reader. So it really takes a kind of open mind to experiencing something different, to want to see something new. So it really is, as a reader, if you want to experience something that you haven't experienced before, in a world where really everything has become about tropes and about very formulaic books. That's the current top 40, top 20 at the bookstore. Everything has become very, very structured in the market. So if you're really looking for something that is as far away from that as you can get, my tagline for a while there was the farthest shore from the mainstream, because that's really what we're aiming for here, is to fill in those little gaps of storytelling where even something like Playing God, which is fairly straightforward, is still something that I don't think you would see at Shaman and Schuster and the big names as far as literary fiction goes. So it's, if you really want something that is, out of left field, you're looking to go over the edge, well, that's where you want to come over to my section over here.
Yeah, and you can find these books on Amazon. I'll include links in the show notes. And on tempestandgale.com, I'll also include that link, and I'll include like Twitter links and everything like that. So is there anything you want to say to people about, say, other projects that we might not have gone over that you want them to be aware of, other places where they can find you besides Twitter and tempestandgale.com? That I haven't mentioned.
The only thing we really haven't talked about was Never Human, which is the one book you haven't seen yet. And that book is, again, it's probably the most experimental thing I've written as an idea. And at this point, I still am not really sure how to even explain it. We don't even have a proper blurb for the book because I don't really know how to talk about that book. I just have a little excerpt there since it... But I will just give that one a little kind of a comp for that one. It's kind of like Kafka's Castle crossed with the old Greek myth of Pygmalion. So if that sounds interesting, you might want to have a look at that one because it's a very, very strange book. Probably the strangest thing I will ever write. But as an experiment, so if you're in for kind of a very, very weird tale, but it's not cosmic horror per se, but definitely falls into the weird tale category, probably speculative a little bit. It's about, it does get into technology, about robotics and AI. It's kind of timely in that way, actually, more than I expected when I wrote it, actually. But so yeah, it's an unusual story set kind of in the present, near past, near future, speculative fiction. But it's not too far out there other than the idea itself, which is very far out there. So again, make of that what you will. If you want to check that one out, it's also either included in American Fictions or available as a standalone novella in paperback.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I'll probably pick that one up. I didn't know it was the castle meets Pygmalion. I'm not even quite sure what exactly that would look like, but I'm interested enough that I'll pick up a copy and have a look.
Well, I appreciate coming on. It's been great to be able to actually talk about these stories. I haven't had to have a conversation about any of these books since I started working on them. So it's a great experience just to kind of flex the muscles here and think about these stories again while I plug away again at the new one.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the new one. You'll keep us updated on Twitter, I'm sure, when it's closer to completion. It's literally, I'm thinking 2027, 2028. It's going to be out there. There's a lot of reading I need to do first before I do some more writing. I am partway through it, maybe a third of the way in, but it's going to be probably a year just to draft it, and then their editing will probably be at least a year as well, like Grendel VVept was. And so, 2027 is optimistic. 2028 is slightly less optimistic, but it's coming. We'll get there. Beautiful. Thanks for coming on. For listeners,
I appreciate it.
If any of this sounds interesting, just get one of the books and jump in, and I'll see you next time.